I'm Katie Fry.
And I'm Sophia Harding.
And we did Black female leadership in the Progressive Era. What was the Progressive Era? The Progressive Era, which lasted from the 1890s through World War I, was a time of great social action and political reform in the United States. The Progressives were mainly middle-class people, largely made up of young individuals who wished to see change, and who believed that the best solution was to educate people and spread awareness. It was a period in history when local, state, and federal governments increased their power and activism. Furthermore, the Progressive Era was a time of new reforms and changes in America. Progressivism deals with a wide range of issues and struggles for America.
The progressive movement's principal goals were to solve issues like industrialization, immigration, urbanization, and governmental corruption. They fought to repair fraudulent city governments, optimize factory working environments, and improve housing standards for impoverished residents. A lot of progressives were passionate about the environment and resource conservation. They were concerned with women's rights, public education, child labor, immigration, regulation of big businesses, and many more. The main groups in the progressive movement were women, African Americans, educators, social scientists, politicians, journalists, etc. The justifications for their movement were that urbanization was troublesome, mass migration posed a threat to social unity, corporate power needed to be reined in, political democracy needed to be expanded, government involvement was required, and more. Uneven wealth distribution, as well as big business owners not treating labor workers fairly, are the main factors that contribute to the rise of progressivism.
Women in the Progressive Era. In the 1890s, American women emerged as a major force for social reform. Millions joined civic organizations and extended their roles from domestic duties to concerns about their communities and environments. These years between 1890 and 1920 were a time of many social changes that later became known as the Progressive Era. In this era, millions of Americans organized associations to come up with solutions to the many problems that society was facing, and many of these problems were staring women right into the face. Women started to voice their opposition to the laws that were intentionally discriminatory. Women were denied the ability to vote in all federal and the majority of state elections during this time. Progressivism was not simply one movement, rather, it was a collection of people working in various groups to achieve their respective objectives. A lot was accomplished over a lengthy period of time because this age lasted for a few decades. Women used their perceived citizenship rights to organize institutions and influence public policy.
Women activists, primarily from middle class and affluent backgrounds, emphasized the unique role that women could play in addressing these issues. With problems such as public health and safety, child labor, and women's work under hazardous conditions so prevalent, who better can confront them than women? These national women's clubs and organizations drew women from all sorts of backgrounds, from the rich to the poor, white and black, native-born Americans, as well as immigrants. Some of these organizations included National American Women's Suffrage Association, National Association Opposed to Women's Suffrage, and the National Association of Colored Women.
Notable women leaders included Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Jane Addams, Ida B. Wells Barnett, Mary McLeod Bethune, and Mary Church Terrell. Immediately after the Civil War, Susan B. Anthony, a strong and outspoken advocate of women's rights, demanded that the 14th Amendment included a guarantee of the vote for women as well as for African Americans. In 1869, Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton founded the National Women's Suffrage Association. Later that year, Lucy Stone, Julia Ward Howe, and others formed the American Women's Suffrage Association. However, it was not until the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1919 did women throughout the nation gain the right to vote.
The 19th Amendment legally guarantees American women the right to vote. Achieving this milestone required a lengthy and difficult struggle. Victory took decades of agitation and protest. Beginning in the mid-19th century, several generations of women's suffrage supporters lectured, wrote, marched, lobbied, and practiced civil disobedience to achieve what many Americans considered a racial change of the Constitution. Few early supporters lived to see final victory in 1920.
Beyond the right to vote, women continued to work not only for the right to vote, but also for a wider political and economic equality, as well as social reforms. The bulk of the white women in the mainstream women's suffrage movement discriminated against Black women campaigners. The mainstream suffrage movement generally focused working with Black women activists and disregarded their sexism and racism-related worries.
One of the greatest turning points in American history was the Progressive Era due to the advancements in social responses led by women and people of color. African Americans experienced racism and discrimination during the Progressive Era. African Americans were excluded from American society due to public police segregation, lynching, political exclusion, inadequate access to healthcare, education, and housing. Together, Black women activists pushed for equality in social welfare, employment, education, and voting rights.
One notable African American woman was Mary Church Terrell. She helped to establish the National Association of Colored Women in 1896, often known as NACW. Terrell's work as a social activist and helping women and children have resources to employment, education, and adequate health care allow her to be remembered.
Another important woman who was Ida B. Wells Barnett. She criticized lynching in the press, which is what the women's club movement were motivated to end, and she also helped to found various Black women's clubs, many similar to the white women's clubs. They addressed issues like sanitation, health, education, combating racism, and of course, women's suffrage.
Lastly, Mary McLeod Bethune. She was a former slave's daughter who rose to prominence as a Black educator, advocate for women and civil rights, and government official in the 20th century. She founded National Council of Negro Women, Colored Women's Clubs, and the Bethune-Cookman Institute. After women were granted the right to vote in 1920, Bethune, an advocate for racial and gender equality, created numerous organizations and oversaw voter registration drives while facing racist abuse. Bethune initiated efforts to eradicate prejudice and lynching by planning a conference on the issues affecting Black people and Black youth. She became the vice president of NAACP.
These are just a few things out of the many that Black female leaders contributed to seek change in the Progressive Era. This was a time of great importance, and without these leaders, where would we be today?